It's the top of the hour, Jim. Are you okay with getting started?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. We are here to talk about the Grinch that stole our holidays this year, Log4j. Our speaker today is Jim Walkus. Jim is our attack surface protection evangelist at Scicognito and very passionate about building good cyber defenses and has over 20 years of experience building security products at McAfee, Symantec, and Tripwire. Jim, you've been following the Log4j saga over the past 11 days, and we would love for you to kick us off with what are some of your key learnings so far about Log4j?
Great question, Mayora. I'd say the biggest learning in this particular issue is the requirement for software vendors to provide a non-disclosure disclosure. That is a unique thing in my experience of breaches like this or incidents like this, where there is an expectation that your suppliers supply you with a explicit statement of we were not affected, and that does not now affect you. And I think that is indicative of the environment that we now live in with COVID, with the supply chain issues that we've had in the real world, as well as the supply chain issues that we've had in the cyber world, whether it's SolarWinds, Excellion, Microsoft Exchange, and now this open source issue with Log4j. We are now very aware of our supply chain and how critical it is to be fully aware of where our stuff comes from and have visibility into our, in this case, external attack surface that isn't necessarily our assets, because it still affects us. Because ultimately, Scicognito issued one of these non-disclosure disclosures because we were using third-party products, third-party suppliers that were potentially affected. And we're still monitoring them today. It's just part of our business as usual. So
absolutely,
that's a key learning. And then other things that I learned was a good response plan for an issue like this includes not only a self-assessment, obviously, but a assessment of those third-party chains. Internally, we had to look at that for our suppliers, and obviously really, really good communication with our customers about our current status, and basically full disclosure, transparency were absolutely critical in this, with alacrity. Very timely measures were required, and that all required internal communications that were exceptional. So I guess the other learning would be in the future, this just highlights the need for response plans, but also response rehearsal. It would be great to kind of desktop these kinds of things. And our capabilities in our platform for reconnaissance, actually critically vital to responding to this very quickly. Our customers were able to very rapidly assess the assets that were affected in their external attack surface and prioritize what they wanted to fix and how they wanted to fix it very, very quickly.
Great. With that, I thought it would be really good for us to assess where our viewers are with their Log4j.
Absolutely.
So why don't we take a couple minutes to poll and see where our audience is with their Log4j response, and then get into the rest of the agenda for today.
And by the way, for our audience, I really wanted Mayora to call this our hair on fire survey. I was hoping that nobody had their hair on fire. But if you did, I wanted to be able to supply any aid that we could in this situation.
So it looks like a bulk of our audience is still finding, patching, and
Still
testing.
finding, patching, and testing. Yeah, absolutely.
We do have a couple that are ready for the next one. So
perfect. I'm proud of you. Way to go. So yeah, absolutely. So I think what we are getting to with Log4j now after 11 days of this is we're getting to more of a business as usual, but business with the new normal. We're all aware now that this Log4j issue is going to be with us for a long time. Just because it's a component that's so ubiquitous. It's built into our infrastructure. So many companies are using open source as the way, and Log4j is just a really good utility for logging in your web applications especially, but it's also ubiquitous for mobile devices, and I just saw that there's more information about a vendor that's been affected by this, that's supplying mobile software and things like that. So I think the long tail of this pandemic, or this outbreak, if you will, is going to be many years in the running. And we've seen that with other vulnerabilities. Right now, everyone's very focused on this, but soon it will be more like, oh man, here's another instance of Log4j that we need to patch in our applications and things like that, and that'll just be an ongoing effort. So
given what you've learned, Jim, can we start with the key elements in your mind for what should be in a Log4j response plan? And then maybe you can just kind of outline where we're going to spend time in the next hour.
What I'd like to do is I'd like to share my presentation for this webinar, and go through the agenda and go through the response plan, and then go through the detection. So let me share my screen right now.
And then while Jim is doing that, we do want this to be interactive. So there's a Q&A panel. Please put your questions in. We do want to address as many of your questions as we can during this hour with Jim.
So what I'm going to be going through in today's webinar is really key aspects to a Log4j response plan, what we learned at Scicognito, and best practices posted by CISA and other vendors and other institutions that have really been on the front lines of this. I'm going to do a quick demonstration of our detective capabilities in the product. I'm going to talk about our passive kind of faster response to this vulnerability, which was essentially a very rapid query that you could run on technologies that were affected by this issue, and then about our active kind of better response. And I say it's a better response because our active response was more like a breach and attack simulation, in that it actually used the working parts of the Log4j exploit, or Log4Shell exploit, to get a response back to an LDAP server that told us exactly where there were systems that we were 100% confident were vulnerable to this exploit. And then throughout, I have Q&A at the bottom of this agenda, but really I'd like to have this be as much of a discussion as possible, because I just think we can learn better by learning from each other and learning from experience. So without further ado, are elements of the Log4j response plan. We posted at Scicognito a blog post about this response plan. There are much more details in that response plan about doing good self-assessment to begin with, tracing all of the elements of your attack surface that are affected by this, prioritizing the attack surface, specifically looking for the risks, vulnerabilities, the exposures in the external attack surface before doing the internal, because logically it makes sense. Attackers are going to be targeting those external assets that they have visibility of in order to get initial access to then pivot into the internal infrastructure. If you can block them before that initial access, you obviously will have a much better Christmas than if you let them in and watch them as they exfiltrate data or infiltrate further into your network. And then the response plan obviously involves testing for this in a passive way, testing for this in an active way, basically identifying where assets could have been affected or were affected, and then being able to vaccinate them, cure them, or mask them with firewall technologies, with XDR, with next generation IPS and things like that. The right side of this list is more about the systemic or strategic things that you want to do as a company in responding to this, and that is, first and foremost, communicate. And communicate in such a way that you're communicating not only with your customers, but you're communicating with your partners, you're communicating back up to your vendors that supply you, you're communicating with your people about the state of security in your organization, about the risks that are associated with this thing, so that they can do the right things quickly to help mitigate it. But also taking care of your people is very important in an outbreak like this, because really your people have probably spent the weekend, at least hopefully not last weekend, but certainly the weekend before that, probably responding to this thing as it was released on a Friday. That was pretty stressful. And this is the holiday season when a lot of people want to take time off work. So now they're worried about, Log4j. The other thing is assume breach. Just assume that if you had a Log4j instance that was externally facing for any amount of time, that it likely could have been breached, and that you want to look at your infrastructure like you are responding to a breach that has happened, so that you can identify any indicators of compromise. And if you do have any indicators of compromise, disclose that. Disclose that to your vendors that you supply software to, that you have a trust relationship with. Supply that to your customers, your clients, so that they can take appropriate actions, especially if they're dependent upon you for delivery of software or hardware that might be in their environment that's affected by this. And if you're interested in disclosure and kind of best practices for disclosure, I think it's going to be a big theme that happens with 2022, 2023. I think there's going to be more legislation that's going to require more transparency about disclosure, especially around ransomware payments, but also about disclosures about vulnerabilities like this, exploits that affect suppliers particularly, because that is the only way to move left in the kill chain to help prevent further exploitation of issues like this. So the four key elements, the four immediate responses in the response plan, are really around self-assessment. And I put up here the software bill of materials, the SBOM, as being really crucial to this. It's funny, but Log4j has made SBOM now SBOM is having a moment as it were, in the current context. People are interested in what software has gone into the software they provide. They're interested in what software has gone into the products that they've bought off the shelf. And that's critically important to addressing this issue, because Log4j can be buried very deep. And all it has to do is get a log message in order to become a beacon for getting malware installed on systems. Luckily, most of the malware that initially took advantage of this was probably crypto mining gear. It was very opportunistic and relatively noisy compared to nation state actors who would be very surreptitious. And that is really where I would be worried about the future of Log4j, is as nation state actors could have used this as a way to plant very stealthy backdoors into infrastructure that will be used to exfiltrate data very, very slowly, so that as to not be noticed. And that's where, you know, assuming breach as a strategy is where I would be at as a CISO. Obviously, the self-assessment also involves partners that are downstream of you, partners that are upstream of you. You are in a supply chain, whether you like it or not, whether as a consumer or as a supplier, or maybe both. And then, you know, keep track of your logs. Basically, keep looking for traces, indicators of compromise. Use your threat intelligence. You know, use threat hunters to look for active compromise. And that goes into tracing. So looking at your external assets first is going to be critical, because that's the way attackers are going to get in. Once they've gotten in, then they're going to move to the internal assets. So that prioritization of external assets is obviously something that Scicognito is very passionate about. That's why we were founded. And we provide you guidance for testing for the Log4j technologies that are in your external attack surface, and then an active detection measure that will go beyond just that external attack surface to find exploitable systems with active measures, basically an automated pen test, if you will, for Log4j. And then you're going to be testing continuously for this thing. You're going to be testing by passive means. You're going to be using threat intelligence for indicators of compromise. You're going to be looking for, with active scanning, vulnerability scanners obviously picked up signatures for this very quickly, and they published them very quickly. And, you know, I've heard CISOs talking about how fast their vulnerability vendors moved on this vulnerability as a matter of hours. Who came up with the signatures first? Where were they able to deploy signatures the quickest in order to target those active scans? It should be noted, vulnerability scanning is awesome for the depth of control that you get on the targets that you're scanning. But if you don't know where those targets are, if you don't have awareness of all of the external attack surface, you're blind to this vulnerability. It doesn't matter how good your vulnerability scanner is if it doesn't know about an IP range that's associated with a subsidiary of a subsidiary that you just acquired. You're not scanning that. So it's very, very important to cover the entire attack surface, have that awareness to go and mitigate these risks. So without further ado, unless Mayora, you have any questions from the audience or in the chat or anything like that, I haven't been monitoring that.
Yeah, no, we're good, Jim. I think we can proceed now to how we are helping our customers finding and validating finding the vulnerabilities and helping them validate how successful they're being with their remediation
Okay.
for Log4j.
Perfect. So I'm going to get into kind of the way that you're probably doing this right now. You know, you've looked at your legacy attack surface through the eyes of multiple tools. You're getting maybe alerts on suspicious indicators of compromise from your SIM. You've been classifying assets or risks probably in a spreadsheet. You're maybe using Shodan or Census for threat hunting and things like that. You're testing maybe with Metasploit or Nessus or Tenable Qualys, something like that. As I've highlighted, vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, these all have very limited coverage when it comes to the entire attack surface. You don't necessarily know all of the assets that are out there. You might be confident that you have that visibility. And then if you use an attack surface management platform, you're going to see a bunch of assets that you didn't know about, and you're going to identify risks that would not have been surfaced otherwise that you can now fix. It can take a very long time to take all of these tools and synthesize their data. So what we suggest is obviously use Scicognito as a platform that provides one pane of glass for really surfacing your risk posture, your security posture, providing you risk intelligence on your external attack surface. And then integrating that data into your response practice, whether it's BMC, ServiceNow, Jira, Zendesk, or other communication tools. The presentation that I'm going to be doing, the demonstration that I'm going to be doing, is of the Scicognito platform. So I like to cover a little bit about the architecture. We have a very stealthy AI-driven botnet. Basically, from the cloud, we are going to start looking at all of the systems that are associated with your brand, your mission, your company. So in the demonstration, I'll talk about Acme Corporation and their subsidiaries, but this could easily be, any company name. That's all we need to get started on graphing business relationships, of doing machine learning and AI to do a graph data model of all of your subsidiaries and all of the assets that they own. And what we're doing with those assets is we're classifying them by business context. We're sorting them into various technology groups, platform groups. We're sorting them into, R&D or marketing or sales or what have you by their business function. And we're providing that information to you in this one platform that can then have our botnet do one step further, which is testing all of the assets that we find at scale. It doesn't matter if the assets are alive IP addresses, if they are not alive, if they are domains or subdomains. It doesn't matter if they're digital certificates or web applications. We have multi-factor testing that will go through these things to find the risks that are important to you. And when we say important to you, we mean we prioritize those risks so that you know the business impact of them. How discoverable are they? How severe are they? What kind of access do they provide? How easy is it to exploit them? If you look at Log4j, it's like it's the perfect storm of problems. It provides remote code execution. It is trivially easy to exploit, and it's very easy to find because it is self-propagating through the log message that is supplied to the systems. And this can be surfaced in web browsers. This can be surfaced in an agent running on the box. There's a number of different ways to attack this problem, and attackers are getting more and more creative with it, as is apparent by the vulnerabilities that came after Log4Shell. 2 other vulnerabilities have been released over the last 11 days against Log4j. Luckily, they don't provide remote code execution. They're only denial of service attacks. Only denial of service attacks. As one analyst here said, rude, but not devastating. There's a difference between having, a system that's unconscious for logging and having a system that is essentially a pod pod or a bot for somebody else, a state actor or a crypto miner. And then that prioritization, that business context, that testing at scale for all of the risks that are associated allows you to accelerate your remediation. In this case, patch Log4j, vaccinate against Log4j by changing configurations, put Log4j systems behind a web application firewall, or planting a endpoint detection and response agent on them, or some kind of blocking technology, essentially virtually patching the host if you can't change it. Any questions so far, Mayora? Or am I doing good?
You're doing great. No questions so far.
All right, super. So the stats that we have for this are obviously pre-Log4j. The stats for Log4j are going to be coming out soon, I assume, but really attackers are targeting your blind spots. Most people surveyed in our ESG survey of November 2020 said that they were attacked by blind spot, via blind spots, and they expect it to happen again if those blind spots continue to exist. The reason for this is because, as I've mentioned, visibility is limited. Vulnerability scans only cover 30 to 60% of the external attack surface. Penetration testing, we generously say that 1 to 2% of the attack surface is covered. I would say for most penetration tests, it's even less than 1%. Penetration tests are like an inch wide and a mile deep. Our capability in our platform is more like a mile wide and a foot deep as far as testing goes. And that allows you to get visibility into risks so that you can shore them up quickly before initial access is provided. It's the reason why MITRE ATT&CK was synthesized with pre-attack in October of 2020, because it was recognized that the tactics and techniques that are being used downstream after initial access are informed by the reconnaissance phase of the attacker's attack run on an enterprise. So that was a whole lot of words. I've done a lot of talking, but I'm going to get into the Scicognito demo to show you how we've responded for testing for Log4j in a passive way as well as an active way. And Mayora, if you have any questions that have come up or anything like that, I'm happy to take them. But
all good so far, Jim. Thank you.
All right, good. All right. Is everyone seeing my dashboard? Mayora?
Yes.
All right, super. So this is the Scicognito dashboard. I didn't take us through the login process, which would have highlighted how teams can use the Scicognito platform to get team-based access control to just the subsidiaries that they have access to, or they should have visibility for. And this goes right into the critical vulnerability notification that we've been providing to our customers since the Log4j vulnerability was disclosed. And basically what our query capability is a capability to look for a list of technologies that we know have been affected. In other words, these vendors have disclosed, or there has been information disclosed that these vendors are affected. And if I go into that query right now, I'm going to see that there is a query here for services containing things like Logstash, Druid, Struts, Atlassian, so on and so forth, that lists a whole bunch of assets that are potentially compromised in Acme Corporation. These are detections that are primarily geared towards eliminating false negatives. So in other words, you're not going to have things that are not in this list, except where we don't know about a technology that is affected. So if somebody hasn't done a disclosure, then the list obviously wouldn't be in the query. That could be a false negative because the query isn't, up to date with regard to that disclosure, or we don't know about that disclosure. The problem with that, though, is that a query like this is going to be prone to false positives. A lot of these technologies might be patched. They might have other mitigating controls associated with them. We can't tell that from our unauthenticated kind of external attack surface view. The advantage, though, is we were able to provide this information very, very quickly because we already had the data in our platform. Our platform had already done that graph model of the entire organization. If you want to see what that looks like, it's this tree map that I'm showing you, where Acme Corporation is grouped into its various subsidiaries, and the assets for these subsidiaries are shown as services in a map like this, that you can see grades for various organizations within this. You can see a list of all the IP addresses that are associated with a system, or in this, for this particular vulnerability, domains and certificates aren't at issue, but certainly web applications would be a place that I'd want to look for potential Log4j issues, and that's being shown here in this list. Another way that we are providing that query-based passive response is in our Log4Shell advisory dashboard. So this dashboard is all query-based. It has a link to the CISA advisory link about the Log4j vulnerability. It very quickly shows you an analysis of where these technologies are associated with this particular attack surface and how many assets are affected potentially by Log4j. All of this information can be exported. The information in the vendor advisory link is an actual link, for instance, to VMware, Atlassian, Jira, things like that, platforms that have been affected by this. You can see the asset types that have been affected. In this case, you see Jira, OpenSSH, a bunch of Windows systems, remote desktop, so on and so forth, and where these systems are located. That is pretty much our passive response in a nutshell. My next step could be I can demonstrate for you what a detection on the active side looks like, or I can show you that architecture first. I think probably I'll show you the detection first, and then we'll cover the architecture. Mayora, any feedback or questions?
Well, I think it would be also good to kind of share feedback from our customers so far on how this type of capability has helped their teams, whether it's saving time or helping them feel more confident about their response.
I'm sorry.
If you have any feedback to share from our customers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm I'm sorry. I thought we were waiting for on folks that wanted to chime in here. Yeah, we've had resounding feedback on our responsiveness in this, the proactivity of having this kind of visibility for environments. I can't bring up any specific customer names, obviously for confidentiality reasons, but we had some very large enterprises that are still testing and patching for this, who have been using the Scicognito platform as their one system of truth when it comes to Log4j. Essentially, the punch list that's generated for doing the work of remediation is generated by the Scicognito platform. And they really appreciate that, because not only are we providing that visibility into the issues that exist, but we're also providing the burn down of those issues as they're fixed. So nightly scans for Log4j, providing them a visibility into that was definitely addressed, that was definitely not addressed, right? So it's that trust but verify is definitely part and parcel with our platform.
That's great. That's great.
So any questions, comments from the audience on this? I feel like I'm
Yeah, no, I think they're just following right along. I think, you know, we
Awesome.
can move on with the next section.
All right. So the next thing I'd like to show is I have a sample issue that I can show you for Log4j. So if we look for CVE, let's see here, CVE equals 2021 44228. Everyone know that by heart now? CVE 2021 44228. Okay. Okay. Oh boy, I need to learn how to query. There we go. So in this case, we have one lonely example of our active measures providing a Apache Log4Shell remote code execution vulnerability in this attack surface. In this case, you know, we're obviously providing a critical severity. If there was anything beyond critical, we would probably use that. You know, I like to say that you know, on this vulnerability, it's like the CVSS goes to 11 on this. The issue was identified by our active measures capability. If we go into our exploit intelligence on this, we have one validation which can be provided by Metasploit. But I can tell you, we have 100% confidence that if our active detection module found a system that responded to our LDAP server, we are 100% confident this thing is exploitable for the Log4j problem. But if you would like to have another set of eyes, you could use our exploit intelligence to run Log4Shell via Metasploit to identify this vulnerability, get the logs for your red team or actually purple team or blue team exercises so that you can see what it looks like when this thing is exploited in your environment. The other thing that we can show in this from this kind of information is the affected asset. So where is this affected asset? It's in North America. We can see that it's an owned asset. It's not being hosted anywhere, or it is being hosted in Amazon, but it's owned directly by Acme. And we can see the discovery path. This is information that we provide for all assets in Scicognito. The discovery path is based off of just knowing that we were looking for the attack surface for Acme Corporation. We can see here that our engine looked at the Wikipedia page for Acme, which told us that Acme Homes was an organization that Acme owns. And then Acme Markets is owned by Acme Homes, which Acme Markets has these IP addresses. We scanned these IP addresses and we found this active IP address, which has a security grade of F. It's highly discoverable. It's highly attractive because it has Log4j on it. Yay. let's go fix that thing right now. We could go into a remediation workflow, and we could, a remediation workflow. We could go into our recipes here, and depending on what kind of system we were using, let's say Jira, we could integrate with that workflow, issue tickets in Jira, issue notifications in Slack, and basically run this thing to ground as quickly as possible with information provided by the Scicognito platform. I'm going to get out of demo mode now and go back into presentation mode so that I can provide the architecture for the Log4j active testing module. So
before you go there, Jim, does it make sense to kind of talk about for folks, how do we do this finding the vulnerabilities and testing if you've actually fixed everything you need to, if you did not have Scicognito platform? What are some tools or resources, and what does that look like?
You're asking me or asking the audience?
I'm asking you, like, what do you?
So I, as I covered in the previous slide, the attack surface protection that you probably are doing is driven off of SIM notifications, Splunk being a common one, other notifications of potential indicators of compromise or things like that. And from that information, you're feeding into systems like asset management, systems where you can do threat hunting, something like Shodan, Census. Maybe you're using your security rating service as kind of like a quick down and dirty view of your external attack surface. But there's a lot of manual effort that's involved in just making that correlation between, is this asset really mine, and where does it sit in the business? Who do I even notify about this problem? And are they actually going to react or not? I've done a lot of workflow or process studies in this realm to determine that it takes about an hour to cover 250 to 1,000 assets with some kind of contextualization, fingerprinting, information that is human consumable for remediation purposes. That 1 hour for 250 to 1,000 assets doesn't sound like much, except when you have an attack surface that has tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of assets in it. Our typical customer has over 150,000 assets in their attack surface. It would take a human being 150 hours to do one pass of the entire attack surface. In an attack surface that's changing anywhere from 5 to 10% per month, by the time they're done that effort, which is not fun effort, they already don't know if the information that they gathered at the beginning of that effort is still current or not. So really what we're saying at Scicognito is, if you want to do that right, automate that. Have our platform do it for you. Basically, don't let a security analyst do a machine's job so that you can get that visibility, because otherwise you're trying to take manual tools and do what should be a automated effort.
Yep. And it is a race for time, right? So it is, you do want to try and save as much time as possible before it's discovered.
Yep. 100%. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the Log4j active module architecture. And this diagram, you'll forgive my slide art or my PowerPoint art, but this is a fairly good way to illustrate what we're doing. At Scicognito, we set up an LDAP server that's part of our botnet. Our botnet, though, is primarily unidentifiable. It's globally distributed. It uses tens of thousands of IP addresses that you're not easily going to be able to identify as belonging to Scicognito. and it's going out there and doing the discovery and doing the testing of your attack surface. And the reason that we want it to be stealthy is so that we don't raise false alarms like from an IDS or a firewall. Oh, you're being scanned from, Qualys or Tenable or something like that. That is, you have to have a whitelisting rule. You have to have maybe a cadence that you understand is going to be happening. Attackers don't work that way. Attackers don't want to be seen. In fact, our founders came from IDF backgrounds. They worked in an industry. They worked in a culture where they knew that if they were being detected while they were doing reconnaissance, that their target would change their behavior and change their attack surface. So it was very important to be stealthy in that kind of investigation. And that's the same philosophy that we use at Scicognito. So we have a botnet, we have the Scicognito platform where you log in and where we saw the demo, and we have this Scicognito LDAP server that are set up. So the next phase of the operation is for Scicognito to generate a list of active IP addresses that are likely to be vulnerable to Log4j. So that's, again, those IP addresses that have associated technologies that we suspect could be harboring vulnerable Log4j. We're going to put those into a list. We're going to associate those IP addresses with a unique identifier. That unique identifier is going to be important later in the process, and we'll get there. But basically, our agents, our botnet, that you don't have to maintain, you don't have to do anything with, you don't even need to know that they exist because you're just consuming the data at the Scicognito platform. Our bots are going to send several challenges, hundreds of challenges to each of those targets, all with this unique identifier associated with them, because eventually that log message is going to get to our LDAP server if there's a vulnerability, exploitable vulnerability, and we're going to be able to correlate that back to the IP address that it came from. So as these messages, these challenges are being received by IP addresses in your attack surface, the systems actually propagate the message. If they have a Log4j module that's deeper under the covers, if that Log4j module picks up the message, it's going to be the thing that responds to our LDAP server. Eventually, we're going to catch a live one. We're going to catch a system that is vulnerable to the Log4j or Log4Shell exploit. And when it does that, it's going to say, I'm vulnerable, and this is the UID that I got in my message, Mr. LDAP server, that's not serving up malware, is just trying to identify benignly these vulnerable hosts. And we're going to use that UID to correlate to the IP address. And ultimately, that becomes a 100% confident detection of a exploited server in essentially a breach and attack simulation. We have taken a system, we have exploited it, we have not put any code on it, we have not required it to download anything from our LDAP server. We've simply done this benignly with logs to be able to tell that this system is vulnerable, and then we present that information to you so that you can fix it quickly. We provide you remediation advice. We provide you with workflows that go into ticketing that allow you to do this quickly. And then we provide you with validation that the fixes have been applied in a timely manner so that you can move on to the next Log4j, you can move on to the next asset, you can move on to the next problem, or you can hopefully get back to your family and enjoy a great holiday season.
That's fantastic for Jim. We do have one question come in about, could I upload my own assets into the Scicognito platform?
Absolutely, 100%. So I really didn't get into the overall demo of the Scicognito platform because this is a focused presentation about Log4j. But one of the great things about our attack surface management capabilities on the front end is that our users have a great deal of flexibility in managing their assets, whether it be I want to upload IP ranges that I know about. I want to notify the system about domains that are associated with us, but also being able to exclude assets very easily, being able to tune how assets are essentially seeded or actions are propagated off of assets. If you know that a domain is associated with a particular tag or a particular business entity within your environment, then you can create a propagation to automatically have the platform classify that asset the way you want it. That flexibility is not something that you find in security rating services, that you find in other, so-called legacy attack surface management tools, because they weren't built that way. Essentially, legacy attack surface management tools were kind of built in the same model as vulnerability assessment. It's just they basically had people on the back end associating assets to things. We've done the hard work of building a platform that actually interacts very well with human beings in order to make this as seamless, frictionless a process as possible so that you get the best results that are actionable for your people.
Great. No, thank you for that, Jim. So I think we can go ahead with, what are some things that our audience can go do next if they want.
Absolutely. So I recommend checking out our blog about our response plan, our Log4j response plan. I've included the link here. If you want to see any of the blog content about Log4j, we've provided a response plan, a list of technologies. We've provided an overall blog post about this webinar. We provided information about our active and passive detection modules that just came out this morning, and you can see that. So you have kind of this perspective that I just gave you in this webinar in a written form that you can share with others at your company. You can also watch our 9-minute demonstration video, or if you really want to take a deeper dive, simply reach out to sales@scicognito.com, and we will set up a demonstration. We can also do an active scan of your environment. We can do a quick scan of your entire attack surface and provide you with visibility for this issue and any others that might be in your environment. Mayora, if you have anything to add on that,
Yeah, no, this is great. We are ready to help, like you said, and these are some great next steps. I'm sure we'll be back with another topic, and we welcome any feedback or questions on what you'd like us to address in our upcoming webinars. And with that, I want to wish everyone a happy holidays, and hope you do find some time with your families to enjoy. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Happy holidays. Bye, everyone.